speaker is Dr. Manodha Gamage. He is Managing Director at ISAC Private Limited in Sri Lanka. Dr. Manodha received his PhD in ICT and Communication Engineering from the University of Electrocommunications in Tokyo, Japan. He's a telecom engineer, ICT consultant, senior visiting university lecturer in many universities, and a popular trainer in ICT industry. And he has been a resource person to APT for many years, I think around a decade. And Dr. Manodha will enlighten us on the role of the policymakers and regulators in the evolution of technologies. So over to you, Dr. Manodha. And I would request if you can keep it to 10-15 minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the kind introduction. And actually, being the fourth presenter, most of my slides are now redundant as well. So I'll quickly go through that, and rather than repeating what we already heard, we'll talk about the essentials in my presentation so that we have more time for discussion. And at the same time, I must tell that I don't represent the Telecom Regulatory Commission in Sri Lanka, unlike the other presenters from their respective countries. So I see some of my friends from TRC joining this, and probably at the discussion time, they can fill us with some of the things that they have been doing in the recent past. So yeah, we have two types of IoT applications, massive and critical. Why it is important is because when it comes to massive type, where you have large number of sensors, the cost of the sensors have to be, the features are very different, and therefore the cost of those sensors have to be very low. The power has to be, I mean, they have to be very low energy devices, so on. On the other hand, critical IoT applications where you need to have very reliable, or rather ultra reliable and very highly available network and devices with very, very low latency. So the features are different, and probably the regulators need to address them in different ways as well. Then most of these massive IoT use cases are very much available almost in every country right now. And smart city probably is a broader term for that, where we can have transportation, agriculture, even the environment related, then parking and smart metering and whatever, all that together as a smart city. So we already saw a lot of things about this connectivity options we have. This is actually from little bit like 3-4 years ago. It was like this. Most of the people were using at the very early stage unlicensed and more proprietary kind of protocols than the standard protocols. But things are now a bit changed with the time and with the more standards coming in. So we can see that more of standardized, we see more of the standardized LPWAN protocols as well. And of course, 5G is coming up, where IoT is going to be the main application for that. And then more standardized LPWAN is there. And obviously, Wi-Fi can be more applicable here because of the Wi-Fi 6, which is going to be, already the protocol is there, and the practical devices might be available soon as well. And other things are now reduced a little bit about maybe Bluetooth and Zigbee for very small scale in-house inside the building applications. So you can see here that most of the applications the requirement is fulfilled by LPWAN, and some are by the 5G kind of cellular technologies. And if you look at the reference architecture of IoT, the lowest layer is about the devices, which is the device layer, and where there will be lots of different varieties of devices, and already a lot of people talked about the type approval. So definitely the regulators will have to change their policies probably it's already changed now, because we have been using these kind of sensors for a few years. If not officially changed, probably they have to change the type approval process for these devices, because, for example, for a large device, some sort of, say, spectrum analyzer or something, maybe you have a certain type approval mechanism. And here, maybe just bringing 2 samples and doing something is not practical. Probably you need to bring in about 25, 50 samples of small sensors, different varieties, before you get the approval as well. So like that, there are a lot of changes that are happening practical, considering the practical situations. And also, as I said earlier, the network protocols are evolving, and now, as we saw, certain things are more getting more standardized and more established. Like, say, for example, initially more people were using proprietary standards, but now proprietary protocols, but now the trend is to move more towards the standard variety. So maybe the regulators will need to address this issue as well. So the other thing is that IoT is something that integrates a lot of other fourth industrialized technologies, like big data analytics, like artificial intelligence and things like that. So a lot of analytics can be built into this platform. And so IoT applications will be built on top of this architecture. And also there are some common things like security and privacy, and also the device management. So this is how the complete architecture, the reference architecture for IoT has evolved. And then maybe regulators can have some national level few operators or few service providers providing this kind of a standard accepted platforms, so that the application developers can develop their new applications on top of these platforms. So I mean, I used this slide in my keynote speech yesterday as well. Regulators who are not taking any action because of expecting the kind of volatility, the dynamics of technology, and but as a result, if the regulatory framework is delayed, that obviously delays the emergence of new technologies. So therefore, action is needed much faster. And as we know, smart city projects usually invested by the governments is a good way to break the catch-22 situation and encourage innovators to come up with more applications. That is where the governments can do some investment and become a user. So in principle, when we are talking about having a roadmap for IoT, so where we need to consider few things like you need to analyze the existing other national roadmaps and policies. Say, for example, what is your IPv6 policy and roadmaps, and what is your roadmap for other technologies, like, say, for example, artificial intelligence and so on, because they are you can't take them isolate. They are connected in every aspect. So we have to very clearly, each country will have to define the objectives of having this roadmap for them. It's a customized one. Of course, you can take a lot of things from outside, but ultimately it has to be well defined for the objectives of each country. And then obviously you will have to revisit and check the existing laws already discussed by many speakers here, and define the strategy. What is the long-term strategy for this, and how it's going to, that will encourage and motivate investors. Once we know where the country is heading in terms of the technology, that will encourage a lot of people to make their decisions. And obviously all stakeholders should participate in this kind of roadmap development, because it's integrated with many aspects. So if you look at the IoT value chain and the stakeholders involved, obviously the telco operators will be will play a dominant role, and obviously they are regulated by the telecom regulatory commissions and authorities. So they will work with the application service providers, and obviously other regulators should play a huge role in this for when you are developing a lot of smart applications, like say city, say central banks, for example, for payment kind of applications. And so a lot of other authorities should security aspects of like country's security, just not the cyber security, but security of the people, and all that should be considered. So a lot of other government agencies and departments should play a role here. We need to get their value and their contributions as well. And obviously a lot of expertise will be in the private sector, and investment will be there as well. So they have to, we have to listen to them as well, like we heard from the presentation from Pakistan Authority, the public hearings. I mean, that's the way forward for everybody. And so if you look at the certain things that can accelerate these IoT deployments and getting the roadmaps, obviously, as I said earlier, we are now moving a little bit away from these proprietary to more of standardized kind of protocols. And obviously we need to encourage and motivate the entrepreneurs to invest in 5G and IoT. And we have to probably revisit and see where we stand in IPv6 implementations and other international standards and guidelines, like say privacy, for example. Do we have enough complex privacy standard based? And then so the free data flow across departments and across borders, across silos within a system is very important. And how to do that, probably the regulator has to look into this matter a lot, because we are talking about sharing data among systems, and that's a big could be a big bottleneck. So that must be definitely a part of the roadmap for IoT. And obviously education and training for all stakeholders related to IoT will be another aspect to consider. And now how to, I would like to suggest, probably we can discuss further on this, like suggest something like, okay, regulators can, obviously they should initiate the roadmap, and then for better inputs can be taken from external expertise where necessary. And obviously you need to revisit some of the existing procedures and the existing systems and policies that can be a barrier for IoT. And then ideally we can have a kind of a task force, because it's not just ultimately not just the IoT we need to develop. As I said, it's very much connected with many other technologies as well. So then there should be a proper national policy roadmap for policy and a roadmap for IoT, and obviously collaborate with international forums. And finally, the output will be the national IoT roadmap. But I think maybe all of you will agree as well. Probably, if you consider most of these technologies like IOT, 5G, maybe like AI, blockchain, and machine to machine, artificial intelligence, this kind of technologies. So there can be a lot of common aspects in there. Say, for example, data protection and privacy. That's common for it. So maybe we can have some sort of a flexible, we can look at it as a roadmap for all technologies, a common one, and then specific ones for each and every technology, like, so that we can, we don't have to duplicate what we are doing, and we don't have to work as silos in different technologies, because technologies are integrated drastically. So that aspect can be brought in, and probably a common roadmap and a common policy can be there, a common framework can be there. And it's a continuously improving and should be a very flexible one, as the technology itself is very much dynamic. So in conclusion, I can say that regulators need to have these IoT roadmaps and national IoT policies that should be in line with the government strategies and national guidelines. And then also IoT policies and guidelines should always encourage all stakeholders. That's why the participation is very important. And then you need the entrepreneurs. So therefore, in Sri Lanka, we have done some PPP projects, especially Colombo Smart City project, for example, but certain things are now on hold because of this pandemic situation, but soon probably they will start further. And government is not just a regulator anymore, so they need to have, they need to play a kind of a slightly bigger role probably because a lot of government institutions will need to be the users, and some infrastructure should come from them as well. So therefore, this collaboration is very important in this aspect, not only within the country, but also with the outside world. And as I said earlier, there could be the idea of like having a common regulatory framework for all new technologies, and then take the specifics of each and every technology could be the way forward in developing roadmap. So I think that's it. Thank you very much. We can use the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Manodha, for an expert presentation to understand that regulators and policymakers should be very knowledgeable about new technologies. I also fully agree that regulators should encourage innovations with timely long-term policies and facilitation. And of course, it is one of the key responsibilities of a telecom regulator to initiate suitable technologies and systems for the benefit of the citizens. And I believe in PT as well, we have vision of the same kind to facilitate